Welcome back to the deep dive. Today is Wednesday, February 18th, 2026. And today we are heading into the heart of the Midwest. We're going to the Windy City,
Chicago.
Chicago. We are talking about a team that, for people of a certain age, really, they didn't just play basketball, they were basketball.
Mm-hmm.
They were this, global cultural phenomenon, almost like the Beatles and sneakers. We are talking, of course, about the Chicago Bulls.
Yeah, it's just impossible to tell the story of the modern NBA without a massive, massive chapter dedicated to the Bulls.
A huge chapter.
Exactly. But the fascinating thing about this deep dive, looking at this stack of research we have here, it's the contrast.
The contrast, how so?
The extreme highs and the confusing lows. You have the absolute untouchable apex of the 1990s.
The Dynasty.
The dynasty that changed sports marketing, that changed the global perception of the athlete. I mean, it changed everything. And then you have the roller coaster that followed.
Yep.
The rebuilding, the baby Bulls, the tragedy of the Derrick Rose era, and then this sort of basketball purgatory the franchise has been stuck in more recently.
It is so wild when you lay it all out on a timeline. It's almost like the statue of Michael Jordan outside the United Center casts this massive shadow that just blocks out the sun for everyone who came after him.
That's it. It's the burden of expectation. I think that's really the theme today.
Okay.
When your franchise is synonymous with the greatest of all time, anything less than a ring feels like an abject failure.
That makes sense. So our mission today is to unpack this beast. We've got sources covering the history from the very beginning, the founding in 1966, all the way up to where we sit right now in February 2026.
Yeah, a lot to cover.
A lot. We're going to look at how a team with a name that was, and this is true, literally a joke, we'll get to that, built to dynasty. We're going to break down the what-ifs, specifically around Derrick Rose, and we're going to look at where they stand right now, in this post-LaVine era with a young core trying to find its way.
So we have to start at the beginning.
We have to start at the beginning. 1966.
The origin story.
So the Bulls weren't the first pro basketball team in Chicago, right? I feel like I've heard of the Stags or something.
You have, yeah. The Bulls were actually the third attempt to make pro basketball work in Chicago. First, you had the Chicago Stags in the 1940s. They actually made the very first BAA finals, but then they folded.
Wow, okay.
Then you had the Chicago Packers, who then became the Zephyrs. In the early 60s, they were a total disaster and ended up moving to Baltimore to become the Bullets.
So by 1966, the NBA was probably a little hesitant about Chicago.
Oh, they were very wary. They just weren't sure it was a basketball town.
And then entered Dick Klein.
And he's a really interesting character in NBA history because he's the only owner to have actually played professional basketball.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, he played for the Chicago American Gears in the NBL. So he was a basketball guy through and through, not just some businessman writing checks.
Right. So he gets the franchise, he sets up shop, but he needs a name. And this is, I think, my favorite anecdote from the early days because it just feels so uncorporate.
Right. There's no branding committee.
Exactly. Today, you'd spend millions on focus groups and consulting.
Mm-hmm. Synergy.
Back then, Klein just wanted something that screamed, Chicago. And in the mid-60s, Chicago was still, the hog butcher for the world. It was the meat packing capital.
The Union stockyards were still a huge part of the city's identity.
So he's brainstorming, he wants that connection to the industry, and he's thinking about names. And from what I read, he was absolutely dead set on a one-syllable name.
He had this whole theory about it.
He did. He really believed that teams with 3 syllables in their nickname never won championships. I think he cited the Montreal Canadiens as, the only exception he could think of.
That's such a weirdly specific superstition.
Isn't it? So he's sitting there with his family and he's pitching all these ideas and he's suggesting names like the Matadors.
Which is 3 syllables. So he's already breaking his own rule.
He's breaking his own rule. Or the Toreadors. Can you even imagine? And now you're Chicago Toreadors.
It just doesn't quite have the same ring to it.
Not at all. So he's pitching these names, and they're kind of terrible. And the story goes that his young son, Mark, is just sitting there listening to all this livestock talk. And finally, Mark just looks at his dad and says,
Dad, that's a bunch of bull.
And boom, the light bulb goes off.
Dick Klein snaps his fingers and says, That's it, the Bulls. It wasn't a marketing firm. It was just a kid roasting his dad.
I absolutely love that. And it led to what is, I think you can argue, the most consistent brand in sports history. I mean, you just look at the logo, that red angry bull.
Yeah, designed by Dean P. Wessel. And this is a key point for our deep dive. If you look at almost any other NBA franchise, their visual identity is like a kaleidoscope.
Oh, for sure.
The Pistons have changed colors, what, 3 times?
Yeah.
The Hawks, the Bucks, the Sixers, they all rebrand every decade just to try and sell more jerseys.
But not the Bulls.
The Bulls logo you see in 2026 is virtually identical to the one from 1966. Same expression, same blood-tipped horns. It is iconic. There's a real strength in that consistency. It says, we don't need to change. We are the Bulls.
And, you know, unlike most expansion teams, they didn't stink right away.
No, not at all.
Usually an expansion team is just, it's a donation of wins to the rest of the league for, like, 5 years.
Exactly. You fully expect to lose 60 or 70 games. But the Bulls were different. In that first season, 1966-67, they went 33-48.
Okay, so a losing record, but...
But it was the best record by an expansion team in NBA history at that time. And this is the real kicker. They made the playoffs. They are the only expansion team to qualify for the playoffs in their very first year.
That is actually wild. Who were the guys making that happen? Because obviously, you know, Jordan is still in diapers at this point.
Right. Well, you had Johnny Red Kerr as the coach. He won Coach of the Year that first season.
Right.
You had Guy Rodgers, who was this wizard with the ball. He led the league in assists. But the real soul of that team was a guy whose jersey hangs in the rafters today, Jerry Sloan.
The original Bull.
Jerry Sloan really set the template for what Chicago basketball was supposed to be. You know, before all the glamour of the 90s, Chicago basketball was blue collar. It was elbows. It was defense. It was diving on the floor for loose balls.
Grit.
Total grit. And Sloan embodied that. And they had some real success in the 70s, too. They weren't just a flash in the pan. They had 4 straight 50-win seasons. There were guys like Bob Love, Chet Walker, Norm Van Leer. They were a very, very good team.
But very good doesn't become a dynasty.
No. They kept hitting a ceiling. And that ceiling was usually named Kareem Abdul-Jabbar and the Milwaukee Bucks.
Okay, yeah.
Or the Golden State Warriors. They got to the conference finals in 74 and 75, but they just couldn't get over that final hump.
Yeah.
And by the late 70s, the wheels were starting to come off.
The franchise started to slide.
Badly. They were struggling to fill the old Chicago stadium. Attendance was down. The team was getting worse. They were basically relying on a coin flip to save them.
Okay, let's talk about that coin flip, because this is the first major what if in our stack of sources, 1979.
This is a moment that completely changed the entire trajectory of the NBA. In 1979, the draft rules were different than they are today. The 2 teams with the worst records in each conference would literally flip a coin to see who got the #1 overall pick.
Just a 50-50 shot.
The literal 50-50 shot. And the prize that year,
Magic Johnson.
Irvin Magic Johnson.
So the Bulls are in the room. The Lakers are in the room. They had the pick from a trade with the Jazz. The coin goes up in the air.
And Rod Thorne, who was the Bulls GM at the time, he calls heads. Gives tails. The Lakers get the pick. They take Magic Johnson. The Showtime Lakers are born right there in that moment.
And the Bulls pick second. Who did they end up with?
David Greenwood. Yeah, look, to be fair to David Greenwood, he was a solid NBA player.
Yeah.
Had a good career, played for over a decade, but he wasn't Magic Johnson.
No. But here's where it gets really interesting to me, looking back. It sounds like a total disaster for the Bulls at the time. But if they win that coin flip...
Right. Let's play that out for a second. If the Bulls get Magic Johnson in 1979, they probably become a pretty good team almost immediately. Magic was that good.
Which means they win too many games to be back in the lottery in the early 80s.
Exactly. If they have Magic, they're likely a playoff team in 1983 and 1984. They are nowhere near the top of the draft board in 1984. So losing that coin flip for Magic Johnson was the necessary tragedy that allowed them to be in a position to draft Michael Jordan 5 years later.
That's some serious butterfly effect stuff. So, okay, let's fast forward to 1984. The draft class that everybody knows, Hakeem Olajuwon goes first to Houston.
Which, even looking back now, is a totally defensible pick. Hakeem is a top 10 player of all time. He won 2 rings. Houston doesn't regret that pick.
Not at all. But then we get to Portland. The Trailblazers have the second pick. And they take Sam Bowie.
The pick that haunts an entire franchise to this day. I mean, the logic was there, kind of. They needed a center because they already had a great shooting guard in Clyde Drexler.
Right.
It was a classic case of drafting for need over best available talent. And it burned them badly.
And then at number 3, the Chicago Bulls select Michael Jordan from the University of North Carolina.
And the world changes. But, you know, it didn't change overnight into a championship team. Jordan was incredible immediately, Rookie of the Year, scoring like crazy, but the team itself wasn't great yet.
But there was a moment, 1986, the God game. I feel like this is a moment where the entire league realized, oh, wait, this guy is different.
What's that context here is just so key. Jordan had missed most of his second season with a broken foot. The Bulls front office actually wanted him to sit out the rest of the year to preserve his health. They were already kind of thinking about tanking for a better draft pick.
Right.
Jordan fought them on it. He refused. He wanted to play. He basically dragged that team into the playoffs as the 8th seed.
And their opponent was the Boston Celtics.
The 1986 Boston Celtics. We're talking Larry Bird, Kevin McHale, Robert Parrish, Bill Walton coming off the bench. Many people think this is the single greatest basketball team ever assembled. They went 40-1 at home that year. 40-1.
Unbelievable. And Jordan walks into the Boston Garden for Game 2.
And he dropped 63 points. 63 in a playoff game against the best defense in the league on their home court. And it wasn't like he was hitting a bunch of threes. It was just attacking the rim, mid-range jumpers, free throws. He was possessed. The Bulls lost the game in double overtime, but that didn't even matter.
Because of what Larry Bird said afterwards.
Larry Bird, who was the reigning MVP and not exactly a guy who gave out compliments easily, he said, "I think it's just God disguised as Michael Jordan."
That's the chills moment right there. But here's the thing about the late 80s Bulls, right? Jordan was God, but the team kept losing to the bad boys.
The Detroit Pistons. And this is where we really need to talk about the Jordan rules. Because people hear that phrase now, and I think they just think it means double team him.
Yeah, it was a little more than that.
It was organized violence. It was a philosophy. Chuck Daly, the Pistons coach, established a very clear set of rules. If Jordan was on the perimeter, you force him to his left. If he drove to the basket, you put him on the ground.
Not foul him.
No. Put him on the ground. Make him bleed. Make him fear for his physical safety every time he went into the paint.
And it worked for a while.
It worked for 3 straight years.
Yeah.
They beat the Bulls in the 88 playoffs, the 89 playoffs, and the 90 playoffs. Jordan was just getting battered.
Yeah.
And this is where Jerry Krause, the general manager, who is a very complicated figure in this whole story, this is where he deserves a lot of credit. He realized Jordan couldn't win by himself. He needed defense, and he needed length around him. He needed help.
So he starts making moves.
In 1987, he drafts Horace Grant. And on that same draft night, he orchestrates a trade for a skinny, unknown kid from Central Arkansas named Scottie Pippen.
And then the coaching changed. Doug Collins, who Jordan personally loved, gets fired, and in comes Phil Jackson.
Right. And Phil brings an assistant coach with him named Tex Winter. And they introduced something called the triangle offense.
Okay, we need to pause on the triangle, because sports fans hear triangle offense, and we all kind of nod like we know what it means. But why was it so revolutionary?
Yeah, let's unpack that.
Yeah.
Because Jordan hated it at first.
He despised it. He called it an equal opportunity offense. He just wanted the ball. Under Doug Collins, the #1 play was give Michael the ball and get the hell out of the way.
Right.
The triangle completely changed the geometry of the court.
How so?
Okay.
Exactly.
Well, it sets up a sideline triangle. So you typically have the center in the low post, forward on the wing, and a guard in the corner. The spacing is incredibly precise. But the key is it relies on reading the defense. If the defense collapses on Jordan, the system dictates that the ball must move to the open man.
So it takes the decision-making out of Jordan's hands, in a way.
Exactly. It puts it into the system. It forced Jordan, for the first time in his career, to truly trust his teammates.
And that trust was the missing piece of the puzzle.
It was everything. Once Jordan finally bought in, or maybe just resigned himself to it, the Bulls became completely unguardable. You couldn't just throw 2 or 3 guys at Jordan anymore because Pippen or Horace Grant or John Paxson would be wide open and the ball would find them.
So 1991, we get to the Eastern Conference Finals. It's the Bulls versus the Pistons again.
And this time, it's different. The Bulls didn't just win, they swept them 4-0. The Bulls had all hit the weight room. They were physically stronger. They took the hits from Laimbeer and Rodman and kept coming. And the Pistons just knew it was over. In the final seconds of Game 4, Isaiah Thomas led the Pistons starters off the court, walking right past the Bulls bench without shaking hands.
Which is still a controversial move to this day.
Oh, it was a totally classless move, but it was so symbolic. It signified the changing of the guard. The Bad Boys era was dead. The Bulls era had just begun.
Then they go on to the finals and beat the Lakers.
Yeah.
That's when Jordan does the famous hand switch layup.
Right. And he just weeps holding the trophy.
That image of him hugging the trophy, his dad, James, right there next to him. That was the release of 7 years of criticism.
Yeah.
He's a scorer, not a winner.
Yeah.
That whole narrative died that night.
Then they win again in 92 against the Blazers, then again in 93 against the Suns. The first three-peat is complete.
And we shouldn't just gloss over how incredibly hard a three-peat is. It's mentally and physically exhausting. By the end of 1993, Jordan was just fried.
And then the tragedy.
His father, James Jordan, is murdered.
It just broke him. He felt like he had nothing left to prove in basketball, and his rock, his anchor, was gone. So, October 1993, he announces his retirement.
And goes to play baseball, which, looking back on it now, is one of the most surreal chapters in all of sports history. The greatest, most famous athlete in the world riding a bus in the minor leagues in Alabama.
Just unbelievable. And the Bulls, they actually kept going. That 1993-94 season, without Jordan, they won 55 games.
Scottie Pippen was a legitimate MVP candidate.
He was, but they lost in the playoffs to the Knicks. They missed their closer.
They missed the guy who takes the last shot.
Exactly. Then comes March 1995. The facts.
2 words. I'm back.
He returns. He's wearing number 45. He drops 55 points on the Knicks at Madison Square Garden, the famous double-nickel game. But they lose in the playoffs to the Orlando Magic.
And that loss to Orlando was so crucial. Jordan looked rusty. He looked human. People were whispering that he'd lost a step, that he was done.
And he took that personally.
Oh, he took that very personally. He spent the entire summer of 95 filming the movie Space Jam. But he had them build a full-size, air-conditioned gym on the Warner Brothers lot. He trained like an absolute maniac.
Which sets the stage for the 1995-96 season, the greatest team of all time.
I think so. It's hard to argue against it. 72 wins, 10 losses.
That record stood for 20 years.
It did, until the Warriors broke it. But, the Warriors didn't win the title that year. The Bulls finished the job. But the key to this team wasn't just Jordan being back and Pippen being great. It was the third guy.
Dennis Rodman.
The Worm. Jerry Krause traded Will Perdue, a backup center, for Dennis Rodman. And at the time, it was considered a massive risk. Rodman was eccentric.
That is maybe the most polite way to put it. The hair, the piercings, wearing a wedding dress to his own book signing.
A whole thing. But on the court, he was a genius. A rebounding savant. He didn't want to score. He didn't care about scoring. He just wanted to rebound and defend. He said he would study the rotation of the ball on other players' shots to know exactly where the rebound would go.
The defense on that team was just suffocating.
Think about this for a second. Jordan, Pippen, and Rodman were all named to the NBA All-Defensive First Team that year. 3 guys from the same team. That had never happened before and hasn't happened since. If you're an opposing offense, where do you go?
There's nowhere to go.
You have the greatest perimeter defender ever in Pippen, the greatest competitor ever in Jordan, and the greatest rebounder ever in Rodman. It was a complete meat grinder.
They just steamrolled the entire league. They beat the Seattle Supersonics in the finals. Then they turn around and beat the Utah Jazz in 97. That was the flu game.
Which we now know is probably food poisoning from a bad pizza in Park City, Utah.
Yeah.
But the pizza game doesn't sound quite as heroic, does it?
No, it doesn't. And then we get to 1998, the last dance.
The tension around that team was off the charts. Jerry Krause had already publicly said that Phil Jackson was not coming back as coach the next year, even if they went 82-smil.
Unbelievable.
Pippen was furious about his contract and was demanding a trade. It was a team that was being held together by pure spite and greatness.
Game 6. In Utah. The final minute.
This sequence it's just basketball perfection.
Mm-hmm.
The Bulls are down by 1. Karl Malone has the ball in the post, guarded by Rodman. Jordan sneaks up behind him, doesn't gamble, just waits for the perfect moment and just swipes the ball clean.
He comes down the court, no timeout.
Everyone in the building, everyone on the planet knows he's taking the shot. He drives to his right, gives Brian Russell a little nudge, a little push-off.
A veteran move.
A veteran move. He stops on a dime. Russell slides past him, and he just rises up. The pose, the follow-through, swish.
It's the ultimate mic drop in sports history.
It is. He holds the follow-through for just a second. The Bulls win by 1. 6th title. Second three-peat. And then the screen goes black on the Dynasty.
The dismantling, it was so immediate, wasn't it?
It was brutal. Jordan retires again. Phil Jackson leaves and goes on a motorcycle trip across the country. Pippen is traded to Houston. Rodman is released. In just a matter of months, they went from the greatest team in history to a roster of guys like Brent Barry and Randy Brown.
And this kicks off what I like to call the dark ages, the baby Bulls era.
It was a really rough decade for the fans. They were constantly trying to chase the next Jordan. They drafted Elton Brand, who was a great player, but he wasn't a franchise savior. They drafted Tyson Chandler and Eddie Curry straight out of high school.
The Twin Towers.
Which never really worked out. They had Jay Williams, the college phenom from Duke, who had that tragic motorcycle accident that ended his career before it really started. It just felt like the franchise was cursed.
Until 2008, the lottery miracle.
This is another one of those statistical anomalies that just seems impossible. The Bulls had been mediocre that year, but not the worst team in the league. They only had a 1.7% chance of winning the #1 pick.
Less than 2%.
Less than 2%.
Yeah.
And somehow, the ping pong balls bounced their way. And it just so happened that in that year's draft, there was a kid from the south side of Chicago.
Derrick Rose, from Simeon High School.
It felt like it was written in the stars. They draft him. He's instantly great, wins Rookie of the Year. And suddenly, the United Center is loud again. There's a buzz back in the city.
And then Tom Thibodeau arrives as coach in 2010.
And Thibs brought that defensive intensity back to Chicago. We talked about the triangle. We should probably talk about Thibs' defense. He introduced a scheme that became known as ICE.
Okay, explain ICE for us.
So basically, in a pick and roll, instead of the defending guard switching or trying to fight over the screen, he forces the ball handler away from the screen, towards the sideline, towards the ice. It effectively uses the sideline as an extra defender and keeps the ball out of the middle of the floor. It revolutionized NBA defense for a few years.
Then on offense, you had Derrick Rose.
Rose was violent. I think that's the only word for it. He attacked the rim with a speed and a power that we had just never seen from a point guard before. He was a blur.
Mm-hmm.
In 2011, he becomes the youngest MVP in the history of the NBA. The Bulls win 62 games. They make it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
It really felt like the start of a new dynasty. They were set to battle the Heatles, LeBron, Wade, and Bosh for the next decade.
And then, April 28, 2012.
Mm-hmm. I remember exactly where I was when this happened.
Every single Bulls fan does. Game 1 of the playoffs against the 76ers. The Bulls are up by 12 with about a minute left in the game. Rose is, for some reason, still in the game. He does a little hop step in the lane.
Yeah.
And just crumbles.
The silence in that arena was deafening.
You could hear a pin drop, torn ACL, and in that one moment, the championship window just slammed shut.
It is the biggest what-if in Chicago sports history, maybe all of sports. If Rose stays healthy, do they beat LeBron? Do they win a title?
We'll never know for sure. But the tragedy is that the very way Rose played, that violent, explosive torque he put on his body, was probably unsustainable. The human body just has limits.
So Rose goes into this awful cycle of rehab and re-injury, and in that vacuum, a new star emerges. Jimmy Butler.
Which was a total surprise. Jimmy was the 30th pick in the draft, a defensive specialist from Marquette. But he willed himself into a superstar through sheer hard work. He became the face of the team.
But the vibes were bad.
The vibes were very bad. The front office Gar Forman and John Paxson, who the fans called Garpax, were constantly feuding with Thibodeau. They eventually fired Thibs, which was really unpopular. Then they traded Rose to the Knicks. And then finally they traded Butler in 2017, a full teardown.
And just to close the loop on Derrick Rose, because this is a recent development for our listeners here in 2026, on January 24th of this year, just a few weeks ago, the Bulls finally retired Derrick Rose's #1 jersey.
It was a really emotional night, and it was the right thing to do. He didn't bring a ring to Chicago, but he brought hope back. And for a few years, he made Chicago the center of the basketball world again. He absolutely deserved to have his jersey in the rafters.
I totally agree. So Butler gets traded to Minnesota in 2017, and the return package for him really defines the next era. They get Zach LaVine, Chris Dunn, and a draft pick that became Lauri Markkanen.
The official rebuild. And it was messy. You had the Jim Boylan coaching era, which was an absolute disaster. Players were threatening mutiny. It was bad.
And then in 2020, new management finally comes in, Arturas Karnisovas and Mark Eversley. And they decide to push their chips in and try to win now. They trade for Nikola Vucevic, they sign DeMar DeRozan, they get Lonzo Ball and Alex Caruso.
The DeBalzac era is born.
It's a funny name, but for a minute there, it really worked.
It worked beautifully. In January of 2022, the Bulls were the #1 seed in the Eastern Conference. Lonzo Ball was the connective tissue of that team. He threw the perfect outlet passes. He played elite defense. The chemistry was incredible.
But then the knee.
Lonzo hurts his knee. And initially, they thought it was just a minor meniscus tear, back in 6 to 8 weeks.
It was not 6 to 8 weeks.
No. It turned into an absolute nightmare for him. He had multiple surgeries. He got to the point where he needed a meniscus transplant.
Which just sounds like science fiction.
It's a donor meniscus from a cadaver. It's a massive, extremely rare procedure for a professional athlete. He ended up missing 2 full seasons. And without him, the Bulls just fell apart.
Yeah, the chemistry was gone.
They didn't have a true point guard. DeRozan and LaVine were scoring a ton of points, but the defense just collapsed. The whole thing just kind of stagnated.
And they entered play-in purgatory.
Which is the absolute worst place to be in the NBA. For 3 straight years, 2023, 2024, and 2025, they finished either 9th or 10th. They would win their first play-in game and then lose the second one to the Miami Heat.
It was like Groundhog Day every single year.
It was. You're not good enough to compete for a title, but you're not bad enough to get a top draft pick. You were just there, struck in the middle.
Which brings us to the major shakeup that finally happened about a year ago, February 2025, the end of the Zach LaVine era.
It had to happen. It was clear the relationship had run its course. On February 2, 2025, the Bulls traded Zach LaVine to the Sacramento Kings.
Let's look at that trade. Because at the time, I think they were pretty underwhelmed. The Bulls got back Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and a first-round pick.
Right. It wasn't a blockbuster return. They didn't get a young superstar back for him. But you have to look at the salary cap sheet. LaVine was making over $40 million a year. Moving that contract was the asset.
It was addition by subtraction.
Exactly. It allowed the Bulls to finally pivot and have some financial flexibility.
They also made other moves. They traded Alex Caruso to OKC for Josh Giddey, and DeMar DeRozan ended up going to the Kings, too, in free agencies. So the band really, truly broke up.
Completely. A hard reset.
And now, when we look at the roster for this 2025-2026 season, the season we're in right now, it's a weird mix of guys.
It is. You have Josh Giddey running the point. He's a great passer,
Yeah.
but a very shaky shooter. You have Kobe White, who has really blossomed into a legitimate scorer. You have Patrick Williams, who is still trying to figure out if he's a star or just a role player.
And the rookie, Matas Buzelis.
Yeah, drafted 11th overall. He's shown some flashes. And, honestly, it is just heartwarming to see Lonzo Ball back on the court, even in a limited role, after everything he went through.
Oh, for sure. But let's be real about their performance. They finished last season 39-43. They're hovering around .500 right now. They aren't contenders.
No, not even close. They are still searching.
Yeah.
They're searching for that alpha, that guy. They don't have a Jordan. They don't have a Rose. They have a collection of nice, solid pieces.
Let's shift gears a little bit before we wrap up. We've talked history, we've talked the roster, but we have to talk about the culture because the Bulls brand is so specific, and it all starts with the music.
Sirius by the Alan Parsons Project.
Da-da-da, da-da-da. Just hearing it, my heart rate goes up.
It might be the single most recognizable sports intro in the entire world, and it's a complete accident. Tommy Edwards, the stadium announcer, heard it in the movie theater in the 80s and just thought, hey, this builds tension pretty well.
And then you pair it with the Running of the Bulls video intro,
which evolved over the years. In the 90s, it was those early CGI graphics of bulls running through downtown Chicago, and they would always end by smashing the opposing team's bus.
I always loved that part, just absolutely totaling the Knicks bus on the screen.
And then the lights go completely out in the stadium, the spotlight hits the floor, and Ray Clay, the announcer from North Carolina, at guard, 6'6", Michael Jordan. Opposing players used to say that by the time the intros were over, they felt like they were already down 10-0. It was psychological warfare.
Another tradition, the black shoes.
This started back in the 1989 playoffs. The whole team decided to wear black shoes as a sign of unity. Back then, pretty much everyone in the league wore white shoes, so it looked menacing. It looked different, like they were a team of assassins.
Except for that one time MJ broke the rule, of course.
Of course. The 1995 playoffs, when he came back from baseball, he debuted the Air Jordan Icky Concords, those beautiful white patent leather shoes. He got fined by the league for not matching his teammates. But they looked so good, nobody really cared.
We have to mention the rivalries, too. Because you don't win 6 rings without making a lot of enemies.
Oh, yeah. The Pistons are the blood feud. That was personal. That was hatred. But the Knicks in the 90s, those playoff series were just wars. Patrick Ewing, John Starks, Charles Oakley, they met in the playoffs almost every single year. It was a rock fight every time.
And the Cavs?
Poor Cleveland. I mean, first Jordan hits the shot over Craig Lowe in '89 to eliminate them. Then fast forward to the modern era, and you have LeBron James playing for Cleveland, eliminating the Derrick Rose Bulls over and over again. It's a rivalry of repeated heartbreak for one side.
And more recently, the Miami Heat.
The Heat are the modern villains for the Bulls. First, the Big Three, with LeBron and Wade blocking Rose's path to the finals. And then Jimmy Butler, a former Bull, joining the Heat and personally eliminating Chicago in the play-in tournament 3 years in a row. It's poetic, but it's cruel.
So bringing this all back together, we've gone from Dick Klein's son saying that's a bunch of bull, to the GOAT, to the Rose tragedy, to the DeBalzac what if, and now to this new uncertain era in 2026.
It really is a franchise defined by its ghosts.
That's exactly the feeling I get from all this.
They've experienced the highest highs that are possible in sports. 6 championships in 8 years, 2 three-peats. The greatest player to ever live. But they have spent the last 28 years trying and failing to recreate that magic.
And that's the big question for them moving forward, isn't it? Is that legacy a foundation to build on, or is it a ceiling you can never break through?
I think it's both. It's a foundation because it makes the brand global. You can go anywhere in the world, Paris, Beijing, Rio, and you'll see someone in a Bulls hat. But it's a ceiling because every team is compared to the 96 Bulls. Every star player is compared to Jordan.
Derrick Rose came the closest. He had the city in the palm of his hand, but his body betrayed him. Jimmy Butler tried. Zach LaVine put up huge numbers, but nobody could live up to the ghost of number 23.
And now, with LaVine officially gone, and this young group led by guys like Giddey and Buzelis, the cycle kind of resets. They aren't contenders yet, but for the first time in a long time, there isn't one designated savior on the roster who is failing to deliver a title. It's a clean slate.
But the statue is still there.
The statue is always there.
So here's a provocative thought to leave you with as we wrap this up. We always talk about the Bulls needing to find the next Jordan to be great again. But maybe that's the entire problem. Maybe the only way the Bulls can truly move forward is to stop looking for a singular, godlike figure to save them and instead build a team that wins despite not having one. But as long as that number 23 hangs in the rafters and that statue stands outside, I just don't know if that's psychologically possible for that city and that franchise.
It's the curse of greatness. Good feels like failure when you've already tasted perfection.
That does it for our deep dive into the Chicago Bulls. From the coin flip to the dynasty to the constant rebuilds. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next one.